What's up, everybody? Welcome to the How to Lead podcast, conversations designed to help you develop yourself and those around you. I'm Adam, joined by Clay. Clay, today's episode brought to us by our friends over there at PushPay. They got a webinar coming up that's going to be really helpful, especially to our friends that are in that in the church space. You want to talk about that real quick?
If you're interested in sponsoring the How to Lead podcast, let us know. We've got a few spots available, but really grateful for PushPay. PushPay makes giving really, really easy. We've talked about that before, just how when that moment hits you and you want to be generous, you go, hey, I want to give some money away. As organizations, we've got to be really prepared for that moment. And I don't know of a better platform than PushPay to do that really well. But on February 25th, 2025, at 10 a.m. Pacific, so 1 p.m. Eastern, they are doing a webinar called Reaching Your Neighbors, Strategies to Bring Local Guests into Your Church. If I were you, I would not miss it. I would make sure to be there. They're going to be talking to a couple of leaders about what they're doing to be able to help with that. Getting people to show up is one thing, but then connecting with them afterwards, I think they have some really great strategies on creating that seamless transition between the digital to the physical and how you can stay connected to people more effectively, really to help serve them better, but also clearly it's going to help your organization as well. So February 25th, don't miss it. Reaching Your Neighbors. We'll put all the links in the show notes.
Yeah.
And we'll make it as easy for you as possible.
Yeah, very specific link that you need to use to register for that. That'll be there in the show notes. You can check that out. And then also going to be in your email. So if you're not on Clay's email, go to clayscroggins.com, sign up for his emails. You'll also get the links right there with all that. So yes, very grateful for PushPay. And again, hey, one thing why it was so easy, end of year, printing out receipts for your generosity.
Right, for taxes,
I mean, boom, log in, use the code. It's right there. Download it. Done. I don't even have to walk to the mailbox, Clay, to look for that thing. It was right there when I was ready for it.
Never has finding a 1040 been any easier.
1040. I'm not going to correct your incorrect use of the form.
Is that not right?
That's not right. The 1040 is your total tax form for you and your. It's it's just a giving receipt, an annual giving receipt. But
Great.
Anyway, okay. So let's talk about where we're going to go today. We're going to actually do a couple of topics or a couple episodes on this topic. I don't think there's a topic we can talk about enough, and that's coaching, right? You and I said in episodes in the past, and I just want to beat this drum over and over again. Everything you look at everything from Harvard Business Review to Gallup to everything in between there is basically saying that bosses are out and coaches are in, right? So this idea of coaching, I don't think it's just going to be a fad, Clay. I don't think that our kids are going to, if they follow in our footsteps and they become leadership development folks like you and I are here in our adult lives, I don't think they're going to, as they talk to their friends and colleagues, look back and go, remember back in the early 20s when coaching was all the rage, I think this is a fundamental shift that we're witnessing. So
yeah. The great news is too, Adam, I think a lot of people, if somebody were to say, all right, I want to try to figure out how to become a better coach, there's a lot of certifications you can get, there's classes you can get, but there's a lot of easy to apply, simple to use advice and techniques. And we're going to provide a couple of those over the next couple of episodes to just try to help you level up, upgrade on becoming a better coach, so that you can use it on a day-to-day basis. In fact, I think what we're going to talk about today is something you can turn around and use.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we'll have a couple of frameworks and formulas and when you get into the nitty-gritty of how to give the feedback. And so today, this one is a little bit more philosophical, and there'll definitely be some practical in here too, but we're calling it the 60-second coaching habit. And it's really this idea of why frequent feedback, why that wins. And so it's going to be this really, really important thing. And here's why this is so important for me, like in my journey, is I have this habit of avoiding the feedback. I kind of, I come from a long line of stuffers, if you will. I see something and I don't want to say something about it. I want to avoid it. I want to withhold the feedback from it. And so sometimes it's nice because I can just be agreeable and just get along and not have to make drama. A lot of times it ends up hurting me more than, and not helping the other person. So it's a lose-lose type situation. Where do you fall on that? Do you find yourself kind of not keeping short accounts at times?
Definitely, and it's hurt me as well. I've got my own war stories, horror stories of when it all piles up, and then you got to have that really hard conversation, and then they sit there and look at you and go, "Why have you not told me about this before?" I texted you that I thought we should call this episode "Why Talking to Teenagers About Sex is So Similar to having coaching conversations at work."
Yes.
Because my wife actually texted me that piece of advice. She was listening to a podcast about talking to your teenagers about that awkward, birds and the bees conversation.
Yeah.
And she said, I love this line that it's better to have 100 1-minute conversations than to have one 100-minute conversation.
Yes.
Right? That's what happened to
We get
me.
it.
I mean,
Yep.
I was probably 13 or 14 years old, and my dad was like, "Hey, you want to go fishing?" And I was like, "We've never been fishing before, and we never went fishing again." So, but it was a one, and shout out to my dad. He did a very good job with it. But it was the classic. We're gonna have one 100-minute conversation about. It was not 100 minutes, but it was one conversation.
Yeah.
But I like that idea of going. No, let's. If you can learn how to become the leader that goes, I'm going to do 100 1-minute conversations. I'm going to make sure to, when I see it, I'm going to say something. When I feel it, I'm going to get it. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to make sure I'm going to circle back around, reflect the way that came across.
Yep.
I just think it comes out better for sure.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. And the sports analogies work so great with this, but if you watch a basketball coach on the sidelines, I mean, they're coaching in the moment. They see it and they say it. See it and they say it. They don't just sit there and just take notes and then they wait 3 days after the game and go, well, here's a couple things you could have done better. So I think things are moving so quick in our organizational life right now that there's something we can learn from those coaches of seeing it, saying it, not waiting. And here's what we really want to make sure that the listeners hear about this is going to be something that helps you. I think that's the big epiphany that I've had is that when I don't keep short accounts, it definitely hurts the other person because I'm not giving them the feedback that they deserve and that they need. But the burden that it creates for me is it's unfair. It makes no logical sense, right? It makes no logical sense that I'm just carrying this burden around. And so I hope people can hear that and that this is something that you do for yourself to make your life a little bit lighter and easier. You can sleep better at night knowing that you've got a way to do this.
Yeah, I like the similar to the sports analogy, the idea of an oil change, right? That if you wait until all the problems with your car build up, you're going to have bigger problems. The frequent oil change, the regular maintenance, that's what we're going to be advocating for in this conversation. Let me give you a quick little anecdotal story, Adam, before we dig into why this is so important and then how to actually do it. I was in front of a group of people, a group in Baton Rouge, and a leader named Matt threw out this story that I have laughed about so many times. But he said, this is an example of what happens in a relationship when we don't keep short accounts, right? He said, early in our marriage, and this guy was like, I've been married 30 years. So this is like 29 years before this, that he still remembers this story. He says, we had gone to dinner with this couple, and you do like everyone does. You get in the car, and what's the first thing you talk about? Whether or not you liked it, what you thought about the other couple.
How did
that
go?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. What'd you think about him? What'd you think about her?
Yeah.
And he said, he gets in the car and he goes, I didn't enjoy that. And she was like, what do you mean you didn't enjoy that? And she's like, I thought they were delightful. And he said, no, I didn't like that. That guy talked the whole time. And he said, I'll never forget. My wife looks at me in the car and she goes, oh, did you not get your talkie time? He was like, we had only been married a little while, but she had never told me that she thinks I talk all the time. And he said it was kind of soul crushing to hear her say that. But he's like, I've never forgotten it. And I've thought about it so many different times in my life to the point where he's sharing it 30 years later. So obviously the regular tune-ups, the regular feedback, telling somebody something in December at your yearly review that they did wrong in July, it is just not helpful. In fact, it makes them feel blindsided, and it will ultimately cause you more problems because the longer you wait, the less relevant and the less actionable the feedback becomes.
That's right. So listen, here's why, right? This is why this is important. When you can give frequent, consistent feedback. It helps you immediately, right? I want to make sure that the leader hears that. It helps you immediately, and it helps them more in the long run, the person that you're coaching. But giving that quick feedback helps you immediately because you're not carrying around the frustration, and then hopefully you can see a behavior adjustment almost right away, so that your team is going to be performing better, which then, therefore, as a leader, makes you look better. So there is a lot of instant gratification that you can get if you can just say what needs to be said in that moment. If you see it, if you say it, and it goes on, and it ultimately helps him in the long run. Clay, every leader. I was just with a bunch of leaders yesterday. Actually in your neck of the woods in Atlanta, and I asked them, we were talking about this topic, and I just said, how many of you at some point in your career had somebody say something to you that hurt, was frustrating, and how many of you raise your hand? Everybody raised their hand.
Everybody.
And then how many of you looking back on it now would say, I'm so grateful? Everybody kept their hand up, right? So that it's immediately, it can hurt, but in the long run, it's a lot more helpful for the coachee when they hear it. And so that's why doing this, it helps you, it helps them. This is the win-win. And so it's something that we need to do. Keep talking next, though, Clay, about why waiting till later really ends up backfiring, right? Because we'll tell ourselves a bunch of lies to wait till later, but let's unpack that.
I'll give you two simple reasons why waiting till later is so harmful. And again, we've all done it, right? But I would say number one, delayed feedback loses its impact, right? For a doctor to tell you 6 months after the cavity started, for the dentist to tell you 6 months after the cavity started growing or building or developing, it's not helpful, right? That the earlier you can catch it, just like in health, the same is true in relationships, that delayed feedback just loses its impact. And then secondly, having that 100-minute conversation, one big conversation is just emotionally overwhelming.
It is.
It's exhausting, right? And we all know that feeling where, you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh God, if you even went to sleep, right?
Yes.
But you wake up in the morning, your spouse, significant other, whoever is like, wow, what's up with you today? You're like, oh, I got this hard conversation today, right? And it's usually, why is it a hard conversation? Usually it's because feedback has piled up, and it feels more like judgment day than it does a coaching session.
That's
right.
So
learning how to make sure that the coachee, that the person that's probably working for you or working beside you doesn't feel ambushed and defensive, but rather supported, right? I think that's the benefit. That's the downside of waiting, is that they end up feeling ambushed. They end up getting defensive rather than what you want them to feel, which is you want them to feel supported.
That piece about it losing its impact, again, it's so clear when you say that, but I forget it so often. And it just reminds me of the great movie, The Wedding Singer, right? When Adam Sandler's character was stood up at the altar and he finally goes and talks to his now ex-fiance, and she unloads all this feedback, and he just looks at her and says, that's information that would have been helpful yesterday, right? Because I could have done something about it. Now it's a little too late. I feel that so often when I do get feedback that's delayed. It's like, I literally can do nothing with that right now, or it's so far removed from the incident, I can't even remember that.
I don't
anymore.
remember what I was thinking or what I was feeling in that moment, because it was back in July, and this is our end of the year review. I wish you would have told me then, right?
Yeah. So it does the person a solid by getting it as close to the incident as possible. But again, it's going to help you because it's going to be more impactful. It's not going to be this, because again, if you delay it for a couple of weeks even, or maybe even a couple of months, they're going to be sitting there going, well, what else are you holding on to, right? So it doesn't build trust. And to me, the lie is just, oh, there'll be a perfect time later. And I'm like, there's never a perfect time. It's like again, you can go back to parenting. There's never a perfect time to discipline your kids. It's always an interruption to your regularly scheduled life, and you just got to make the time for it when the coaching moment arises. You've just got to go for it. And so there's big problems with waiting till later. So let's do this. Let's talk about just a few quick hits on how to build this habit of keeping short accounts, right? Like how we can do that. So we've got 3 or 4 things that I think are worth talking about. So you want to just go through a couple of those real quick?
Sure. I'll jump into the first one.
Yeah.
I would say number one on how to build the habit of short accounts. Number one, as much as possible, keep the feedback bite-sized, right?
Yeah.
You think about those little, this isn't a full Snickers. This is the little snack Snickers. It's a little bite-sized. Think about it in that way.
Yeah.
Aim for one clear takeaway for the conversation. I like this simple rule of thumb, Adam, but if it takes more than 60 seconds to say, you're saying too much, right? If it's a speech, if it's a diatribe, if you're waxing eloquently, if you're on your soapbox, it's too much. And instead of, I would say, even in the bite size, keeping it as specific as possible, instead of, hey, your presentations aren't clear. No. Hey, next time I wonder, should you state what you're trying to say up front so that the audience knows exactly where you're going with this?
Yeah.
Right? That's just a clear bite-sized takeaway, as opposed to, I've seen her do 17 presentations now, and I've never heard a clear one, and I'm finally going to tell her that every presentation... No. Bite-sized. Keep it bite-sized.
That's right. Yeah. And again, you may sit there and go, but I've got a lot to say. Well, when you're keeping short accounts, you're keeping it to one thing at a time, and there will always be opportunities to say it all. So just focus on one relevant thing that they can do right now. Clay, so back in the day when you and I were working at churches, we used to do a lot of public speaking and getting ready for weekend services or midweek services for different age groups. And so we had a process where I was on staff where we were giving people feedback on their talks. We wanted to do the talks well. We wanted them to be impactful. And so there were about 6 or 8 of us that would get together on a regular basis. And I remember one of the guys that was teaching us how to give that feedback to somebody said just that. Like, listen, you've probably got 15 things that you want this person to do to get better. Let's all of us just focus on one thing that we think will move this talk a letter grade, because it's you don't have time to work on all of it at one time. So just keeping it bite-sized, keeping it focused on one thing, it's way more digestible, and certainly fits with where everybody is with their attention spans right now.
That's right.
Too. So, all right, second thing, so that's keeping it bite-sized. The second thing I would say is this, is like giving feedback in the moment whenever possible. So again, as close to the incident as possible. I was in this room that I was with leaders yesterday. This guy just said, see it, say it. See it, say it. I love that, right? It's pithy and it works. And that is, if you see something, let's talk about it right away. And so I think Kim Scott shares some great stories about this in Radical Candor. Actually, her bragging on Sheryl Sandberg, that Sandberg was great about this, that right after a meeting, if she saw Kim Scott do something, while they were walking to the next meeting, Sheryl was like, hey, let's talk about this. Next time, let's do it this way. And sometimes what I would say for us as the feedback giver, if just project the confidence that this is not that big of a deal. Like, hey,
That's right.
I really like this. Now let's go on here. And because if you sit there and you're like holding your hat and like wringing your hands and
this
really looks like a big
soul.
That's
this
right.
Is be so heavy.
It just makes it awkward for everybody.
That's
and
right.
then it's going to feel like a big deal. Like, I think my boss is really mad at me right now. Look, they're really struggling to say this. They're going to fire me. No, they're going to start telling themselves, just say
it's
it
not a
with
huge
confidence,
deal. You're not
smile,
gonna get
pat them on
fired
the
over
back.
this.
No,
Right.
and just so that just to have some confidence when you do this, see it, say it in the moment, it's going to be more impactful. And if you project the confidence, then they're not going to feel like their world's about to fall apart. It's just what we do.
That's right.
This is just part of it. So
let me give you
yeah.
two little heads up for our next episode. We're going to give you a real specific way to do it. So come back next time for that. We're not done with this one, but I'm just telling you, in the next episode, we're going to give you a specific way to handle this. And then secondly, I would say, if it is something that is really heavy, or if you find that your emotions are really elevated,
That's good.
There is a moment where you go, I'm going to wait. I'm going to sleep on this. I'm going to sit on it for a day. And in the third series, the third part of this would be in 2 episodes. We're going to give you a process on how to have some maybe those more difficult conversations,
ones,
how to
yeah.
handle those well. But again, this is, hey, in that meeting, you started with this. I wonder, could you start with this instead next time? This is, hey, just with your hands, they were kind of all over the place. I wonder if you just put them in your pocket every now and then just to contain your, right? It's the quick feedback that's, instead of letting it build up, just give it as soon as it happens. See it, say it.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Normalizing it. That'd be a third part with this, is we're trying to embrace this coaching culture among our team. So normalizing feedback to make it a part of everyday culture, again, is going to take away the potential sting that goes with this. And so
That's right.
there is something about, it's like having conversations about conversations. And as a leader, when you get your team together, probably, I don't think you can remind them enough of the why behind coaching and why we do give quick feedback and why we do strive to keep short accounts. And what we need to do, especially if we've got young people on our team, and there's some really interesting research from this guy at UT Austin. He wrote a great book called 10 to 25 about how to motivate 10 to 25-year-olds. And some of his research is indicating that if you have some younger people on your team, anytime they hear criticism from an authority figure, the immediate thought running through their mind is, does this person think I'm incompetent? Mm-hmm. And so there is a possibility that as you coach on a regular basis, what younger people are going to be hearing is, you're incompetent, you're an idiot, you're a fool, I don't trust you, you have no hope, you're never going to get better. So you've got to have some conversations about the conversations. It's similar to what I tell my boys now with their sports, is you need to be nervous when the coach stops coaching you.
That's right.
Because that means they've kind of given up.
Right.
And so
getting coaching is normal.
It is normal.
That's
and
right.
we do this because we see potential. We see an opportunity for all of us to get better. And we're going to get to this last point here in a second. It's not just a one-way street. It's a dialogue, and you give me feedback too. But this is just what we do because we care, right? In some ways, we're doing this to make ourselves better, not to critique and ruin your day.
Yeah, in the episode on that we had the interview with the CEO of PushPay. We told you that this episode is brought to you by PushPay.
There you go.
The interview with the CEO of PushPay, she did such a great job of talking about how it is part of they want a generous culture. And she said, one of the ways we found to be generous is to be generous even in our feedback. That, hey, we want to be as generous as possible. This is not me criticizing you. This is not me coming down on you. This is a normal part of our culture because nothing's perfect. We believe in continual growth. We believe that we're not there yet, that we can all get better. And I think the more you keep short accounts, the more it does normalize it.
Yeah, that is it. And so then the last idea here, so we talked about keeping it bite-sized, give feedback in the moment, normalizing it by talking about it. And then the fourth idea is just flipping the script. And again, just as a leader, you cannot ask for feedback enough. Is that overstating it, Clay?
Absolutely, because the culture is created by how you receive feedback, not just by how you give feedback, right?
Right.
It's the, when I remember being in college and I was an engineering student. It did not take me long to realize I should not be doing this. And they agreed. They were like, we don't think you should be doing it either. But I'll never forget one of my first classes in my major, somebody asked a question and the professor just berated the student. And what that, now not only what does that do to that individual? Sure, that's worth paying attention to. But what that does for the rest of the semester to anyone who's thinking about asking a question is it just obviously shuts it down. So learning how to go, hey, this is not a one-way street, but this is me saying, hey, next time try this. But it's also going, what about me? Did you see anything that you would change if you were playing the role that I just played? Help me out. Give me something as well, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I don't think it is an overstatement. Just asking for it as much as you possibly can. Again, let's go back to Kim Scott. Have your go-to question. Hers was, what is one thing I can start doing or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? It's an open-ended question that if you're going to ask for feedback, it's got to be open-ended. Don't just say, is there anything I can do better? Because they're always going to say no. And so what is one thing I can do to make these meetings better? What is one thing I can do to support you more? That's going to model all of this for your team. Now, one caveat on this before we land this plane on this particular episode, we have been really focused on more of the critical feedback. All of this applies to positive as well.
That's right.
And that may be one thing here where, Clay, in public speaking, they talk about vocal variety. You gotta speed up and slow down and go high and go low and go loud and then go quiet. All of that keeps the audience more engaged. That's a pretty decent tip for coaching. You need vocal variety. And so there's probably some people listening that you're sitting there just going, oh, this is great. Probably because you give too much critical feedback on a daily basis where it's maybe coming across positive feedback. That's right, sounding like a nag. You need to do all this with positive. And then there's some people that are just crushing it on the positive side, and you need to add in some more of the improvement, more of the critical feedback. And so this does go both ways, both with positive and negative. And just the key here is those short accounts. It's got to happen. So Clay, one final call to action. What you got?
I would just say try it today.
Yeah.
Just give it a shot. And this is obviously not, this is for conversations at work, but it's not limited to that. I think you and I bumped into this advice first in marriage counseling, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Learning how to keep short accounts in your marriage, learning how to keep it as a parent. But I would try it today at work. Just try to have 1 60-second conversation. Again, 100 1-minute conversations is so much better than one 100-minute conversation. It's true talking to your teenagers about sex, and it's true in those conversations at work as well. So give it a try.
All right. Good to be with you, Clay. See you.
Well, that's all we got for today's episode of the How to Lead podcast. You can always reach out to us via email. We can be reached at info@howtolead.work. That's info@howtolead.work. Every episode is mixed and edited by the team over at Sound of a Rose. You can learn more about them at soundofarose.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.